Why is this important? Well, a recent Gallup survey shows that only 13% of workers worldwide are engaged in their work. So it means that if there are 100 of us on the call today, for example, 87 of us are not able to connect in a meaningful way with our work, and we're not likely as productive as we could be. And that may not be the case with the folks on this call today, because just by virtue of being on the call, this probably isn't a random sample. But think about the folks you work with and keep those numbers in mind. And employee engagement is critical. It affects everything from how profitable a company is to how productive people are, and also employee turnover, absenteeism. It also affects things like product quality, and in the healthcare industry, we've even seen it affect patient outcomes. So employee engagement matters, and new alpha leaders are really good at optimizing this. So how do they do it, and how can we do it? 3 big ideas here that I'm going to share with you today. Number 1 is there's some great research that shows making the work meaningful for people helps them to actually increase their own engagement. All right. But how do you make the work meaningful? It sounds like this sort of lofty term, and of course we all want to do it, but what does that mean? What can I do to make work meaningful for someone who I lead or supervise, or maybe just a colleague? And there's 2 big ideas here. One is you can just ask people specifically, what do you like most about the work? And then help them take on projects and tasks at work that allow them to do work that they like. That doesn't necessarily mean that 100% of their time is spent on things that they love. We all have aspects of our job that we have to do that maybe aren't our favorite parts. But if you can help people connect with the aspects of their job that they enjoy or their role that bring them personal meaning, then you can increase their employee engagement that way. Also, another idea here is to help people connect the work that they're doing in their organization with the larger organizational vision. So sometimes as leaders in organizations, we kind of take for granted, right, that everybody is just sort of connecting with the big picture and where we're going, but that's not always the case. And so I'll give you an example from my own experience. When I was the chief of operations for the Carnegie Foundation, part of my job was to make sure that everyone from, the president of the organization down to the finance assistant understood how the work that they did connected with our larger goal, which was to work towards educational equity. And so I remember having conversations with people all the time, and actually at one point I did have a conversation with our finance assistant, and we talked for about 10 minutes about how the work that she did processing the payroll and getting paychecks out, making sure that everyone had money that they needed to live and survive, how that connected to the vision, right? Because if people have their paychecks, then they're able to come into work, they have gas money, they can come in, do the work that they need to do to push forward our goal of educational equity. So for her, the work that she did was in some ways a couple steps removed from the larger vision. But having that conversation was really helpful in making sure she felt like more than a cog in a wheel, and that she saw how the results of her work actually affected the larger outcomes that we all cared about. So making the work meaningful is key. Another idea is to let people know that you value and care about them. A social scientist friend of mine actually shared this strategy with me, and at first when I heard it I thought, well, that's nice, that sounds warm and fuzzy, sure, people should feel cared about. But she actually pointed me to some data that shows that the number 1 factor in terms of people being engaged at work is whether or not their managers are engaged and how closely they relate to their manager. So if you as a supervisor or a leader or a manager can help people feel that they're valued and cared about, that strengthens that relationship there, and that's going to increase their employee engagement. And then finally, you can invest in people's professional development. So we're going to talk a little bit more about millennials in a moment, but in general, people in this day and age, they want a very clear career track and development opportunities. This is especially true for millennials, but I've found that it's actually true for people across generations. Having a company that invests in your professional development makes you feel valued, and it gives you a sense of purpose and direction. And that actually is going to make your job as a leader easier if people are finding that through professional development opportunities, because they're not going to necessarily over-rely on you for that. All right, so those are some ideas for how to optimize employee engagement.